以知识为资本，用价值的逻辑看世界，《资本论》。
Humans are storytelling animals.
We do not look for information, and we look for meaning.
Why do I spend so much time on social media? Oh, the social media companies, they have managed to hack the human code, and they are now using my evolutionary baggage against me in order to capture my attention.
We are so worried about the future because we are kind of gradually losing the control of our life, such as we are losing our free will.
It's a very complex category. I mean, do we ever have a free will, and what do we mean by that?
We will be replaced by AI in the 10 to 20 years. How can we restore a genuine connection to real life? And why is this connection important for the future of our human society?
嗨，朋友们好，欢迎收听《资本论》，我是冰洁。这期节目发出时呢，2024即将收尾。回顾这一年，谈到科技领域的变化，全球 AI 热潮还在持续高涨。相信包括你我在内的很多人，在这一年里都在学习使用 AI， 并且摸索与 AI 共处的方式。我们人类社会是由故事连结的，也是被故事塑造的。随着科技的发展，人工智能可能会以更剧烈的姿态来冲击人类社会。那么当原有的故事不足以支撑人们的身份认知，新的意义是什么？现象级畅销书《人类简史》作者尤瓦尔·赫拉利在今年推出的新书《智人之上》也深度探讨了同样的问题。当 AI 接管越来越多的工作，人类如何重新审视自我？生命的意义又该如何重新定义？为此，中信出版特邀尤瓦尔·赫拉利与德国马克思普朗克社会人类学研究所所长项彪围绕以上核心问题展开对话。本场活动由清华大学社会学副教授严飞主持，对话为全英文。为了方便大家收听理解，我们也将本次对话的精华版链接放到下文的 show notes 里。希望此次对话呢，能给大家带来新的启发，也更有底气应对未知，应对未来。
大家晚上好，我是严飞，欢迎大家收看本次的对谈。Hello, Professor Harari and Professor Xiang. I'm Yan Fei, a sociologist from Sociology Department at Tsinghua University, and I will be today's moderator. In today's panel, we will discuss Professor Harari's new book, Lexus. And based on this book, we will explore how we understand the meaning of being human in the information age, where human society is headed, and what opportunities and challenges we may face. So the first question will go with Professor Xiang Biao. So could you please talk about a little bit about the feeling of reading Professor Harari's works, such as from a Sapiens trilogy to Lexus? Professor Xiang?
Okay, this is a very challenging examination question, I suppose. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And Yuval's books, for the over last 15 years or so, and especially the latest one, really make me think. So instead of I provide any summary or report of my reading feedback, I probably just ask Yuval a question that has occupied my mind, especially when I read your latest one, is what do you think of the question of meaning? Because I was slightly puzzled when I read the part of your discussion about story in your latest book, Nexus. You said, it's a human has always relied on stories in order to organize information, and then, but now the way how information is organized changed. But somehow, when I think, okay, when we read the stories, when we read the Bibles, when we read all these fairy tales and mythologies, we do not look for information. And we look for meaning, because we don't care, how much water people consumed in the time of Jesus or Muhammad. But we want to know how one thing leads to another. We're interested in the plot. We're interested in their feelings. We're interested in all kinds of characters. And we're interested in how they play out with each other, and etc. And also the story is powerful, not because it conveys much information, but it conveys meaning. And that will lead to further questions about how we understand AI. I mean, in my view, is really is not about how the organize the information, but rather the AI disembed the information from human interaction and divorce information from meaning. But you must have thought of this a lot. So I'm curious to know, do you have a theory of meaning alongside with the storytelling?
Thank you very much for this very important question. Information comes in many shapes. It can be, very technical data of how many people lived in a particular city in a particular year, and how much food they ate, and how much water they drank. This is very technical information. But also what you refer to as meaning, this is also a type of information of a much higher level, of a much higher standard, how the universe works, what kind of rules govern the universe. This is also information of a different kind. This is the information that tells people how to live their life. It's not the specific numbers. Humans are storytelling animals. We think in stories. If we try to understand our personal life, we tell the story of our life to ourselves. Like we are a certain character. We came from a certain place. We have certain aims. This story may be completely wrong. Like I may tell the story of my life that I'm a victim and people are all the time behaving badly towards myself, towards me. And this may be wrong. Maybe I'm actually hurting other people and I just don't see it. But the story I have in my mind about who I am, what is my life, this shapes my understanding and my behavior. This is also true of entire nations, of entire civilizations. They also tell the story of the universe and of themselves in the universe. And you often again find nations telling their story as, for instance, the story of victimhood. That we are good, but you have all these other people who are hurting us unjustly. And again, this story may be completely wrong. Maybe we hide from ourselves some of the bad things that our people or that our country has done. But our understanding of ourselves is shaped by this story. So for me at least, definition of information, it includes even this very kind of high level information. And maybe the most important thing is that people never react to reality. They react to their image of reality, to what they think about reality, to the story about reality. If there is reality and there is a story about it, and the story is quite different from the reality, nevertheless, people will react to the story. This is what will shape their behavior.
Actually, it is quite exciting to say that while we are living in the information age, but we start our conversation with story. As a sociologist, I think we are kind of a storyteller. So I believe the key difference between humans and other species lies in our unique capacity to create and share stories. So I'm wondering, how do the two professors understand the idea of human community? And how would they define identity in the information age?
Should Yuval go first? Yanfei.
Okay. So there is not one human community. There is an entire chain of communities. Every person belongs to many groups. I have a family, and I have maybe a neighborhood or a city, and I have a nation, and there is also the entire human community of the whole planet, which I'm also a member of. And, some communities, they claim to be the only one. Like you have to give 100% of your loyalty, of your identity, only to this one community. But this is never true. Humans are always part of several different communities, and sometimes we care mainly about the family, sometimes we care mainly about the nation, sometimes we care mainly about the fate of the entire planet. And it's not like we have always to give 100% of ourselves only to one community or to one identity. And with regard to identity, identities, again, they are shaped by stories, which means that to some extent, all identities are fictional. There is no objective definition for a community or for an identity. This is in contrast, you think, for example, to, say, biological species. Whether I belong to the species Homo sapiens, or to a chimpanzee, or gorillas, or a cat, or a dog, this is an objective definition. If you check my DNA, you can tell whether I'm human or chimpanzee, whether I'm cat or dog. It doesn't depend on what I believe, on the stories in my mind. And this identity also dictates certain abilities that, some species can fly, they have wings, and other species can't fly, they don't have wings. This is objective. But if we look at human identities, they are never objective in this way. To which family you belong, okay, biologically, you are the child of your mother and father. This is an objective definition. But your choice of spouse, your choice of whether to be close to your cousins or not to give them a big part of your life, this is already a cultural choice. In some cultures, it's okay for, say, one man to marry several different women. And this is a family. A family can be one man and 4 women and their children. In another culture, this is completely forbidden. One man can only marry one other person. But there are countries, like in the US, that one man can marry another man. It doesn't have to be a woman. And they're also considered family. So what is a family is not an objective biological definition. It depends on cultural beliefs, stories. And it's the same with the definition of nations and religions and all larger human groups. They don't have, you cannot check the DNA of somebody and by that know to which country they belong or to which religion they belong. This all depends on the stories in our minds, on our beliefs.
Yeah, as apologist, of course, what you said is music to my ears, the diversity. And this question about what human community is, I think is a very pertinent question today. I mean, we don't ask this question, we can ask this question as a technical question to define what such a thing as a human community is. But I think in today's world, with just the US election outcome is known, with the increasing tensions in your region, in the Middle East, and of course, Eurasia here close to Germany, and also the domestic politics become increasingly fragmented and polarized in different parts of the world. This question, what the human community is, do we still have common ground across humanity in the world? I think is not only a scientific, intellectual question, but is also very much a social and political concern. I completely agree with Yuval that number one, we always belong to different communities, and this is not only a matter of fact that should become our consciousness, and everyone should consider him or herself in this way. If not for the sake of a fact, truth, but also for the sake of fun. If you think you belong to many groups and you can bring the good things of different groups together, life will be much richer. And also there is a question of scale, as Yuval mentioned, from family to community to nation, and then how to manage the question of this multi-scalar relation. I think that actually is quite essential to my own work, because the modernity is a story of scaling up, because we are connected with more and more people, and therefore questions of large scale, such as globalization, world war, and nation building become more and more important, at least symbolically and discursively. Whatever slogans is associated with the planet and the nation will become much more important, as if carry more weight then questions about the community and the family, and certainly in terms of resource distribution, etc., they all kind of more and more orient towards large scale of things. But now, as we see that if we look at the large scale, the entire world, I think the politics is quite messy, and certainly I don't see any quick solution to bring the world together soon. And at this moment, what should we do as individuals? You and me, as a scientists, authors, or as workers, of office workers, engineers, what can we do? I guess we have to look at the human community in a multi-scalar view and consider your nearby, your community seriously. Probably pay more attention to this small-scale community. And actually, I mean, this is in a way Buddhist point of view. Where is the world? The world is next to you. And now we are having the world, the three of us talking to each other. You can consider that is a world because all of us have very different background. We have different way of thinking. We are bringing to this screen multi-perspective knowledge and etc. And it itself constitute a world, and it will generate more ideas and thought. I mean, this is the whole point of having conversation. If we take this perspective, then we are having the world in our hand, right? So what is the human community? I think my answer would be, it is all up to what you pay attention to, what you can create. And the human community is certainly, to a great extent, is a result of your conscious effort. Of course, it's also a result of your history, the structural conditions that is beyond your choice. But to a great extent, what a human community means to you, what can you do in the human community and to the human community, is very much a function of your choices and actions. And then go back to the question. I think I don't know whether you agree. For me, probably the question between meaning and information, or in your thinking, is a different scale of information, can be a productive thread for thinking. So when we're thinking of this, how we can make a human community ourselves, the question of meaning is probably important, or different levels of information will help bring the information together in our hands, instead of becoming a passive consumer of information. And through meaning is a very important part of community building and community creation.
And I think to add to what you just said, the key understanding is that we are dependent on so many other people, and not just people. We are dependent on animals, on plants, on the ecosystem. Some people think about identity as being completely separate, that I have my identity, or my community has our communal identity, and we are thereby completely separate from everybody else. We are completely independent. You know, there is a lot of, especially political leaders today, that they say we want to be completely independent. Now, what is independent? It means that you do not depend on anybody else. And this is a fantasy. There is no such thing in the universe. And again, of course, this is Buddhist thinking. Everything is codependent. The food that we eat, you know, the food I eat for lunch, many often it comes from the other side of the world. The clothes that I wear that keep me warm, now in London it's quite cold, I have clothes protecting me. These clothes were made by foreigners in a different country, maybe thousands of kilometers away. The medicines that keep me alive, maybe they were invented by scientists who live, again, in a foreign country, thousands of kilometers away. And if you think about, again, food, so almost all the food we eat, even if it was grown in our country, it was first domesticated, invented, usually in a very different country. Like if you like to drink coffee, coffee comes from Ethiopia. If you like to put sugar in your coffee, sugar was domesticated in New Guinea more than 6,000 years ago. So even this simple thing of just drinking coffee in the morning, that makes me dependent on Ethiopia and on New Guinea. And people who have this kind of fantasy that no, I must be completely independent, they should just think about how they breathe every moment. Like, what is breathing? We are taking something from the world into our body, and then we give something back. And again we take something from the world, and again we give it back. We are completely dependent on this flow that connects us, that makes us dependent on the rest of the world. And if you say, no, I want to be completely independent, I stop breathing. After 2 minutes, you die. So there is no such thing as being completely separate, as being completely independent.
Yeah, I totally agree with two professors' observation. And when we talk about human community, we have different types of human community, and we also have the different scale of human community. And the different types of human community also matches to the different versions of stories, right? We have the grand story. We also have the everyday story. So when we talk about the grand story, and you both always explore the evolution of human society from a broad picture. And Professor Xiang Biao also argued in a very similar way. I believe we need a grand narrative to understand where we stand in history and what we are doing. So I'm wondering, how can a big picture story and a grand narrative inspire us and give us insight compared to just focusing on individual and personal issues? So this is my second question.
Well, Professor, would you like to go first?
Yeah,
Okay.
Professor Xiang,
this
you would
time
like
we
to go
can take
first?
a turn.
Yeah.
But I thought that this is a really question mainly for Yuval, because you are the big picture writer. But I go ahead first, then you can correct me. I think a grand narrative, of course, I mean, in academic world, with the rise of postmodernism since 1970s, at least, there has been questioned. People think, okay, how can you be sure when you tell stories on such a large scale? But I personally believe that practically, not for intellectual purpose, but practically how we live, thinking how we can live in this world, this big picture and the grand narrative is still important. Is important not necessarily they reflect the truth, but they give us a sense of reference, give a sense of orientation, and give us a framework in order to organize the information that we encounter, and therefore give us a meaning about our existence. So, but the question, the challenge is, as Yanfei, you asked, how relevant and what kind of use is grand narrative can provide? Because grand narratives can go terribly wrong. And as Yuval just mentioned, we know that all of us are co-dependent on each other in today's world. But at the same time, there is a rapid rise of far right and protectionism. And do they basically refuse to recognize that we are co-dependent? And they say we want to be independent because the story, the big story, the grand narrative of globalization makes them feel threatened, meaningless, and they somehow are nostalgic for their community life, which gives them more sense of security and human dignity and autonomy. I think we also have to recognize that it is a genuine desire. And for many, especially for the people who feel they are economically left behind or politically marginalized in the time of globalization. So the big narrative of the one world, interconnectivity, makes them actually fearful. And so the question is really, big narrative as a reference point must be connected to or translated into smaller narratives in which people, the individual person, can see themselves in that story. If you tell people a story that, basically, is something inevitable, I mean, you just have to follow this rule and you don't know, you are stupid, now I'm telling you the truth, how the world is like. This will not generate a positive meaning. So the story, grand narrative, must bring back the individuals into the story. And then how to do that? I mean, that I think I completely agree with Yuval. I mean, it's especially for people like me who combine social science with humanities. And I do regard that my job as more as a storyteller rather than a truth teller. Of course, I mean, I do respect the truth. But the question is that how to make truth meaningful. Simply being truthful is not enough. And the truthful will not work unless it is meaningful. And how to make it meaningful? The story must open space for the individuals to see themselves, how they act in this picture, and also convey a sense that they can take action to some extent to change the the big situation.
Yeah, I completely agree that we need big stories, but these grand narratives must connect to our personal individual lives and actually give us agency. If the grand story makes us feel helpless, powerless, then we reject it. But a good grand narrative, even if it's about millions of years, it tells you something personal about yourself. And this is not just storytelling, this is also truth-telling, because it is true that each one of us is the product of millions of years of evolution and of history. And if we want to understand the simplest, the most basic things in our life, we need to think in terms of millions of years, not in terms of just a few weeks or in terms of our own lifetime. So I gave one example with drinking coffee, that if you want to know, where did I get this coffee? You need to know history of thousands of years of different countries. Oh, it came from Ethiopia. It came from New Guinea. Similarly, if you like, I don't know, to play football or to watch football. So football came from Britain. This is another part of the world which contributed something to your life. And of course, if you go even deeper, not to our games and food, but to our emotions, that are maybe the most important thing in us. Our emotions have been shaped by millions of years of evolution. If you want to understand relations between parents and children, this is not something that was created by Jewish culture or by Chinese culture or by British culture. This is tens of millions of years in the past. So I know a lot of people today, they have issue with food. They go on a diet. They want to eat less sweet food, which is not good for them. And they don't understand, why does my body want to eat so much food that isn't good for me? Is there something wrong with me? They feel that maybe there is something wrong with my body, with me. But actually, if you look at the grand narrative of human history and evolution, it becomes easy to understand, and it gives you some agency. We like to eat a lot of sweet and fat food because this made sense when our ancestors lived in the African savannah tens of thousands of years ago. If you go around the African savannah and you encounter something sweet, like ripened fruits on a tree, the most sensible thing to do is to eat as many of them as quickly as possible, because this is a good source of energy. And if you eat just one or two fruits and go away and say, okay, I come back tomorrow and eat some more, by the time you come back tomorrow, maybe the baboons next door, they ate everything. So in the African savannah, it made sense to eat as many sweet things as possible. We still have the same tendency today. Our body, in a way, doesn't know that we now live in a modern civilization and we can go to the supermarket and we open the refrigerator, we find a chocolate cake and we eat all of it. Because for our body, we are still in the savannah. And similarly, in social media today, a lot of people, the same way that we have a food diet, we now also need an information diet. People spend hours on social media just watching all these videos, and they don't understand why I become addicted to these videos. And this is the same principle that, again, in the African savannah, if you go around the savannah and you see a tree and you see a bush and you see a stone and then you see a snake, all your attention immediately goes on the snake. Otherwise, you can die. We have a mechanism inside us that is something looks frightening, scary. We cannot take our eyes off it. And this saved our lives, of the lives of our ancestors in the African savannah, tens of thousands of years ago. Now, social media companies, they discovered this mechanism in our brain, and they now use it against us. Because when you scroll on TikTok or on Facebook or on YouTube, it's only snake, 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 snake. They find what captures our attention, and they constantly show it to us to keep us longer on the platform. So even to answer this daily question, why do I spend so much time on social media? If you have the big narrative, the big story of human evolution and human history, it becomes understandable. Oh, the social media companies, they have managed to hack the human code, and they are now using my evolutionary baggage against me in order to capture my attention. So this kind of grand narrative about millions of years of evolution, it actually makes it easier for us to understand ourselves, to understand our problems today, and thereby it gives us a little bit of agency, of power over our lives.
So my feeling is that people are kind of tired of grand story, so we have to bring individuals back in. So this leads to my third question. So today we have a growing emphasis on individual feelings and individual experience. So what effect does the rise of individual consciousness have on society, and how might it related to the development of information technology? So Professor Harari, you go first.
I think that there is a complex relationship here, because on the one hand, suffering only exists at the individual level. A collective, a group, cannot suffer from pain or from hunger or from sadness, and similarly cannot be liberated from suffering, cannot experience joy or love or happiness. A collective, like a tribe or a nation, is just a metaphor. It has no mind, it has no brain, it has no nervous system. There is no such thing as the pain of the American people. There is no such thing as the love of the Australian people. There is no Australian mind that can experience love. Only individual people can experience love, or hunger, or pain. So when we talk about this level, which is maybe the most important level, because morality, ethics, is ultimately about liberating us from suffering. And this can only happen ultimately at the individual level, because this is the level where we experience suffering. But power in the world comes from large networks of cooperation. Individuals by themselves are very weak. They do not have a lot of influence on what is happening in the world unless they come together in large groups, hundreds, thousands, millions of people working together. So, on the one hand, we need to build and sustain these networks of cooperation, which are the only ones that can deal with large-scale problems like famine or like epidemics. You cannot deal with it as an individual. On the other hand, we should never forget that ultimately, why do we want to prevent an epidemic? We want to prevent an epidemic in order to liberate people from suffering. And this can happen only on the individual level, because only individuals actually have minds.
Yes, and I would just follow what Yuval mentioned about the relation between the individual and the collective. Only individuals will actually experience suffering. But the problem is, throughout the history, the real cause of many problems like wars, battles, are not the suffering, is always the question, why do I suffer? Why not the other person suffer? And the people's desire is to make sense of the suffering, in addition to stop suffering itself. And in order to make sense of suffering, there will be a jump. They say, oh, is this because my entire group is being subjugated? Is that my community is being bullied? And so therefore, I need to revenge, and the revenge not as one individual, but probably as a collective. Here there is constant jumping between the individual and the collective. And why it is happening, this scale jumping, I think is really the question of meaning, because people do need a certain collective imagination in order to make sense of individual suffering, precisely because suffering is such an individual thing, and yet cannot be solved by individual, him or herself. And then this leads to the question, Yanfei, about how do we understand today's kind of, you can say, well, explosion may be an exaggeration, but certainly there is a surge of individual consciousness. And in a way, we can say, individual consciousness is always important. But what really changed today is that individuals become much more expressive because of social media, because of rapid increase of education, especially in the global south. And this is a basic fact that we have to take into consideration. And the young population, economic development, people have more free time and more prosperous, and therefore, of course, they also become more sensitive. So many more people today are capable and also are very interested in expressing their feelings almost instantly on the social media. So therefore, we have a huge kind of explosion of noise and sound of individual feelings. So how do we handle that? Then what is the paradox is that when everyone is expressing his or her own views, actually what we see is not really authentic and clearly genuine individual voices being heard, but very quickly they become fractions. There is a collective emerging from this sound, and so therefore we see, for instance, the right-wing politics, all kinds of forms of extremism. And extremism is not an individual phenomenon. It is certainly a group. It's based on a certain perception of a group, right? So what does this mean? It certainly has to do with information technology, which create a situation that people can become much more expressive than before at the individual level. And secondly, we have to pay attention to the dialectics between the individual and the collective, because society can never be purely individualistic. Whenever the individual feels they are exercising their agency, they are already always captured by certain collective power, or they will have to form certain collective power. And now the problem is that what is apparently seems to be very individualistic, driven culture of expression and etc. became a quite unreflexive collective. So you do in the populism movement, you will see everyone feels, yeah, I'm very authentic. I don't pay attention to political correctness. I say what I want to say. I'm truly myself, independent. But of course, collectively, you can see the politics is shifted to certain direction with a very clear collective agenda behind that, even though people are not conscious of that. So this, I think, go back to what Yuval said about the importance of a grand narrative. When the individual becomes so expressive and the individual believes that him or herself is really, the master of the life, actually they become blind. They become blind to the fact that our human body is a result of millions of years evolution. They forget that we have parents and grandparents. They already taught us a lot of things that are beyond our choices. And they forgot that we, form the meaning of our understanding through interactions with other people or by comparing ourselves to others. If the others do not exist, then your own self-consciousness will not exist, and yourself as a meaning-making agent will not exist. So it is an important moment to really bring back to this kind of what I think in your book is kind of mentioned as intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity as, I think, a grammar of life through which the human collective is formed and through which this kind of more meaningful and reflexive perception of the world can be developed.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
one very important thing in this respect with regard to feelings, that as you're saying, we now have this flood of expression of feelings, but people don't have enough curiosity to investigate where do the feelings come from. You feel something and you think, oh, this is me. You completely identify with what you feel, and then you start expressing it and writing about it. But you don't stop to ask, where did this feeling come from? And this, I think, is maybe the most important and interesting question that people can ask themselves. And this goes back thousands of years. You know, whether it's Buddha or Socrates or many of the wise people of the past, they told people, yes, feelings are very important, but don't be a slave of your feelings. Investigate, where do they come from? Why do you feel this and not something else? Your investigation should not stop just with recognizing what you feel. The really interesting question is, what are these feelings and where do they come from? And you often realize these feelings, they don't just define who I am. They come from different places. And if I don't understand where my feelings come from, then I'm not free. I'm actually enslaved by my feelings.
Following this point, I would like to raise my fourth question. So with the development of technology, especially in the information technology, seems like people have more opportunities to express themselves. And the way humans seems like have more power to shape our future. But alternatively, we are so worried about the future because we are kind of gradually losing the control of our life, such as we are losing our free will. So I would like to hear the opinions from two professors.
Professor, would you like to go first?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, I mean, this is, I guess, the kind of a key thesis of the book of Nexus. But I here just to mention what I have been thinking so far in the past nearly 1 hour. So the question of free will, of course, is a very complex category. I mean, do we ever have a free will, and what do we mean by that? And then the technology comes in, and that is a turning point. I mean, I agree with Yuval's assessment. You know, the AI is very different from the technologies that we know of, because before there is, you can say, I mean, I'm thinking aloud. You can say there's 3 types of technology. The first one is, I mean, according to Heidegger and others, first of all, you have a tactic, right? You have this, how to work with soil, how you observe weather, so therefore you know when you can sow the seeds and when you should harvest. So it's that kind of develop a technology in order to reach a more harmonious relation with the condition, with nature. And then you have the industrial time, then it's a technology is not to work harmoniously with nature, but is about the conquering, and you create artificial surrounding. You have this greenhouse and in agriculture, and you have fertilizer. So it's you change the nature of soil itself rather than work with it. And I think AI probably is the third type of technology, because technology is not only to facilitate our will against nature, but probably will change the nature of will altogether. And of course, there is a danger. I mean, I cannot assess how likely it is because I don't have the expertise, but it looks like that there is a quite real danger that the technology will turn human into like what we have turned nature into, right? So it is kind of we become object that the technology will work against, manipulate. And but should we be afraid of that? I don't think. I mean, there's no point to be afraid of, I think. So the question is for thinkers, for intellectuals, is how can we respond now? And I think what Yuval just mentioned about the story of emotion and feeling is a telling one, because through human history, again, we know just very crudely, you can say in traditional society, patriarchal feudal system, and emotion is an object to be suppressed. You have to confirm the order and etc. And in the modern time, one of the greatest achievements, I must say, since Enlightenment, is to celebrate emotion. I mean, if you have all kind of feelings, it is legitimate. to have this feeling, express it, and etc. So that is have new lead to new philosophy of education and love and etc. Tremendously powerful. But now we come to the new stage that the emotion now is being on one hand manipulated by technology, and at the same time, we as if isolated individual, we feel our emotion can be expressed so freely and can be so powerful, and then we feel, okay, the legitimacy of my feeling can never be questioned because this is me. But as Yuval mentioned, actually, you can say in a total isolation, you can say you have, of course, it is legitimate for you as a human being feel a certain way, but it is not you. I feeling this way. There is a social life of a feeling. There is a social force that creates this feeling. So you never know it is you feel this way or this feeling is coming to capture you. So therefore, certain kind of basic scientific knowledge, history, biology, anthropology, to recognize, okay, probably the feeling is not coming from inside of me, but it's like a wind that I'm being captured. So therefore, I have to consciously create a space between myself and my feeling and my surrounding in order to have better understanding. So I think the technological age, really, it is an exciting moment. Why? Because it raises new challenges for us as a human, thinking how we should exist. And both the traditional wisdom, traditional meaning pre-modern, and the modern enlightenment ideals are not sufficient at this moment. And sometimes we'll have to go back to like a Buddhist wisdom, and sometimes probably we still have to follow enlightenment principles and to create new wisdoms to guide our practical way of being. It's probably more a practical question than theoretical because there's so many fronts all come together. So the key question is that how you and I navigate the situation on a daily basis. And from there, probably there'll be new ideas, new philosophy emerge. But it's always emerge from this kind of daily negotiation and the struggles and the multiple contradictions.
Yeah, I agree that this is very different from pre-modern technology and also from modern technology. The biggest difference with AI is that it can make decisions by itself, and it can invent new ideas and even new technologies by itself. Every previous technology, it gave power to humans, and then of course the question was whether the power was given to individual humans, to a collective. If to a collective, who makes the decision in the name of the collective? And these were the big questions of history. But AI presents a new question because it doesn't necessarily give the power either to individuals or to collectives. It keeps the power to itself. It even takes the power away from us because it can start making decisions by itself. And a printing press could not decide which books to print and could not write a new book. So then the question was, okay, who decides which books to print? Can anybody print any book they like? And who writes the books? Is it a small elite? Do all people have the education, the ability to read and write and thereby to create books? These were the big questions around the printing press, but nobody imagined that the printing press itself can start deciding what to print or can write new books. AI can do exactly that. In social media, again, who decides what will be the next video that you see on TikTok or YouTube or some other platform? It's not a human being. It's an algorithm, it's an AI deciding what to show you. And increasingly, the AIs are themselves able to write texts, to create images, even to create entire videos. Now, at this stage in the development of AI, they are not so good. You can say that humans write better texts than AI. But this is really just the very beginning of the development of AI. Human evolution, organic evolution, took millions and billions of years, from tiny microorganisms until you get dinosaurs and mammals and finally humans. AI is barely 10 years old, we can say, and it may continue to develop for centuries, for thousands of years, for millions of years. But it is developing much, much, much faster because it is inorganic. Inorganic evolution is millions of times faster than organic evolution. So if it took millions of years to get from amoebas to dinosaurs, maybe it take only 10 or 20 years to get from the AI amoebas to the AI dinosaurs in 20 years. How would they look like? What will they be able to do? And what is true of books is true of every other aspect of our life. Again, if you think about the military, so the most powerful weapon ever invented, the atom bomb, it nevertheless made humans more powerful. Because the atom bomb itself cannot decide to start a war, it cannot decide which city to bomb, what strategy to use in the war. AI, in contrast, is able to do that. Already today, in the war in the Middle East, for instance, AIs are increasingly making decisions. They are choosing the targets what to bomb. So previously, the big question about the power of military technology was, again, which humans will make the decisions? Is it a king? Is it a democratic government? Is it representative of the people? This was the question. Now there is a new agent, a non-human and non-organic intelligence, which is able to make decisions by itself. True, in 2024, its capabilities are still very narrow. But with each passing year, its capabilities will increase. And it's a very big question. Is it a wise thing for humans to create something more intelligent than us that could escape our control and can start making decisions about us and ultimately take all power away from us?
Yeah, we are still, as humans, we are still much better than AI at this stage, but seems like we will be replaced by AI in the 10 to 20 years. So my last question goes with AI. So as the AI world will be our future, so our sense of real life experience seems to be fading. So in this situation, how can we restore a genuine connection to real life? And why is this connection important for the future of our human society? Professor Xiang, you have mentioned the nearby.
So question nearby. Yeah, no, what Yuval just said earlier was something, mentioned something that I have not thought before, is that the question of life, right? The AI has a tremendous power of being self-generative, yet it is inorganic. So because it is inorganic, therefore it can defy the basic rule of time. Yet it is generative, so therefore it is embrace kind of a feature of life. So this is probably something never happened to this planet before. So you have a kind of lifelike yet inorganic thing. So therefore you have a lifelike power, but it can be achieved in a time scale that we have not no life, no other form of life can be close to. So, I mean, this is really, it's interesting to me because the question is not really about will AI be smarter than human, the competition between human and AI, but really the basic constitution of the universe, the world. Do we want to introduce this entirely new, I don't know what to call it, is a kind of institutive logic or this grammar of world making, right? This kind of inorganic life power. So now the kind of AI now is like very exciting, but also it's like a cloud over us. what should we do? I mean, my question is always, as a scholar, we can't really make any immediate policy decisions. We cannot take any political actions. But I think each individuals, each citizens do have tremendous power. So the question is how we should respond, how should we cope with this situation? And one of the reasons that we feel we are so powerless today, as if AI is taking over everything, is not only based on scientific prediction, but also is because we lack of imagination. We feel that, okay, the technology will determine everything because the market economy is organized this way, the state power is organized this way, the whole world, the geopolitical is such. And then we don't have other languages and discourses and imagination to make sense of our existence. For instance, why can't, to some extent, we cut off from these networks? Why can't we organize a certain way of living that can be more resilient and distanced from the system and even to push back and the power of the system? So I think there's still things to do. And then Yanfei, you mentioned how you can, have the real life feeling. For me, but this is really go back to the beginning of our conversation. For me, the biggest thing, one of the biggest concerns that AI brings is the disembodiment of information. When the information becomes disembedded, divorced from human interaction, then information acquires this inorganic life, because you can always monitor the person as almost a biological organism. How does that person feel? Then I'm going to send more message or encourage the feeling, and etc. I mean, this kind of information did not exist in the pre-AI time, because how I feel, this information would only be accessible and meaningful for myself and for the person I'm talking to, right? But now it can be monitored and manipulated by an abstract system, which is removed from the actual interaction situation. And then this embedding information, and therefore information become a weapon. If the information always stay embedded in human-to-human interaction, I mean, no matter how I'm mad with you, Yuval, but I know, we are human. I mean, I will somehow stop myself. I won't become so endlessly mad. But if I'm expressing, look at all the different video posts, I mean, on the social media, then it's become, I actually cannot stop myself, that kind of feeling. I can be easily, therefore, manipulated into certain way of thinking. But just to go back to the question, so I think that's this disembedding information and therefore weaponization of information must be fought against. And this is why I have been promoting the idea of the nearby. We should pay more attention to our immediate surrounding and locate and ground our feeling and emotion into the human-to-human interaction situation, and learn not to burn yourself out by all this emotion that is like a tsunami going through the social media.
Yeah, I really like the idea of connecting to the nearby, and the most nearby is our own bodies. Again, this idea of embodiment, this is the one thing that AI does not have. AIs do not have bodies, and they do not experience sensations and emotions which are a bodily phenomena, from pain and pleasure to love and hate. Now, what happened in thousands of years of human history, we have learned how to connect a large number of bodies, of human bodies, using all kinds of mental constructs, using words and stories, using money, using laws. And this made us very successful because we were the only animals on the planet that can understand words and money and laws. All the other animals also had bodies, but they could not use money. You can buy a horse for money. The horse did not understand what is happening. No concept of money. Now, AI understands or beginning to understand words and texts and money and laws better than us. And AI can read all the books and all the dictionaries, and large language models today already understand language better than a lot of people, and is able to generate texts and hold a conversation better than most people. They understand money better than most people. Nobody, not the best accountant or investor in the world, can follow everything that is happening in the stock exchange, in the market, all the time. We need to sleep sometime. We have limited capacity. But AIs are able to follow all these financial transactions. They understand finance better than us. It's the same with laws. Not even the best lawyer in the world can remember all the laws. AI can remember all the laws. So all the systems that we have built to connect millions of bodies together, now AI comes and takes over these systems. And if they now control all these connections, so we have a big problem. And we need to remember the one thing they still don't control, they still don't have, is the body. And we need in a way to go back and reconnect with our body, with its sensations, with its emotions. And maybe the last thing I say is that going back to this issue of inorganic life and organic life, that we have now a contest between the organic and the inorganic. For 4 billion years, only organic life existed. And organic life works by cycles. There is day and night, summer and winter, times for activity and time for rest, for sleep. AIs, they don't care about all these cycles. They are inorganic. They don't care if it's night or day. They never need to sleep. They don't grow and decay the same way organic beings are. And the question is, who will adapt to who? At the present moment, the AIs, they are trying to force us to be like inorganic. Like in more and more systems, the system puts pressure on the human beings to be active all the time. In finance, in many systems, there is pressure, be inorganic. Never go to sleep. Never take vacation. You don't need that. But actually you do, because you have a body. You're not a computer. And the big question is, can we slow down the AI systems so that they are in line with the rhythms of organic life? Or will they force us to try and move faster and faster and faster until we collapse? Because if you try to force an organic being, an animal, a human, to be on all the time, to be active all the time, to be excited all the time, eventually we collapse and die. And this is the big struggle that is now happening. And I think that if each of us remembers that we are still animals, that we still have a body, and if each of us also invests more time and effort in developing our own minds and not just in developing the AIs, I think we will be okay. That we still have the capacity. We are still in control. We didn't lose control. But if we don't do it in time, within a few years, the AIs will be in control, and then they can force us to function according to their logic instead of us making them function according to our logic.
AIs don't have body, and we humans, we have body, and we use body to sense, to touch the real world. This is very insightful. Thank you so much, Professor Harari and Professor Xiang. We have a great talk today, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
So this is the end of our conversation today.